Protesters are in the streets of Rochester, New York for the sixth straight night tonight, and that's after video was released showing officers holding 41-year-old Daniel Prude on the ground after placing a spit hood over his head back in March. Prude died days later. A medical examiner ruled his death a homicide caused by, quote, complications of asphyxia in the setting of physical restraint. It's the medical examiner. Well, there have been violent encounters between activists and Rochester police, with officers firing pepper balls at protesters. The protests last night and so far tonight seem to be very peaceful. A few days ago, the first major survey from the last several months of protests was released by Princeton University's Bridging the Divide initiative. And in its examination of demonstrations and political violence in America, the survey found, quote, in more than 93% of all demonstrations conducted at the Black Lives Matter movement, demonstrators have not engaged in violence or destructive activity, while authorities have used force in over 54% of the demonstrations in which they have engaged. Joining me now is Omar Wasow. He's an assistant professor of politics at Princeton University who studies protests and unrest. And it's great to have you, Professor. And I know this was done, colleagues at Princeton who did this study, and you've done studies of some of the things that happened in the 1960s. I guess the first question is, like, the terms themselves are very difficult and loaded about what counts as destruction or violence and what you count as police use of force. And those definitions themselves seem to be at the heart over the sort of political and cultural battle over what the protests themselves mean.
That's absolutely right. And sociologists, social scientists more generally have had to come up with criteria where a protest that is, coded as violent is one in which there's significant injury or death or, arson. But it's got to cross a threshold. And as you mentioned, 93% of these events have been peaceful. And that really has, I think, allowed the Black Lives Matter movement to capture a kind of moral high ground in the country, in the larger debate, as people have tried to make sense of this.
How have these reactions happened in the past? I'm thinking of the 1960s, which you've studied particularly. And I know in Ferguson there was, because there were both. I was on the streets in Ferguson, and there were stores that were burned down. There were stores that were broken into. There were gunshots in the street, though not necessarily directed at police, but there was violence on the streets. There was also huge, largely peaceful protests. How common, I guess, is that mix of elements in the setting of street protest?
It's quite common. I mean, in the 1960s, we had hundreds of these events. I mean, this was part of what drew me to this research, as I was aware of events like the Watts Uprising or Newark, Detroit. But it turns out there were more than 750 protests in which protesters engaged in more aggressive, more violent resistance to state violence, white supremacy. And so I was interested in trying to understand that period. And what we see is that people, and as you noted earlier, one of the most common patterns is there's a kind of escalation that happens. The police, there's some incident, maybe a young man is shot by the police, that leads to protests. Then there's a kind of crackdown that in turn escalates things. And so that pattern is actually quite common, both in the US and internationally. And I think one of the things that's interesting about that study is they really help put the U.S. case in a global context where the kinds of things we're seeing here are actually really common around the world and speak to some of the challenges that America faces as a polarized society with high degrees of inequality. And then that kind of mobilizes as calls for justice on the street and also non-trivial amounts of state repression.
The map shows just the sort of scope from the study of these protests that did happen, sort of in an almost unprecedented fashion, and sort of divides between riots and protests. Again, there's sort of a definitional question there. But there's another sort of lesson from some of your research and from others about the perception in the media about the nature of the protests and the battle over which element of that, right? So if 1,000 people come out and march peacefully, and also stores are broken into and a building is lit on fire, and people throw rocks at police, the question of, like, which of those two stories about the night is the story about what happened?
Yeah, that's I think one of the most important things that I took away from my own research is, right, these are contentious events. They're complicated. There are incidents of people throwing water bottles at cops and cops retaliating in some kind of aggressive way, and that can escalate or it can de-escalate. And how do you describe something where there's some kind of moderate or there's a small percent of protester-initiated violence and what happens often is the media then is sort of set to interpret these events. And as there's an old saying in the TV business: if it bleeds, it leads, right? And so violence is inherently newsworthy. You could, from the media's perspective, right, we don't cover a plane that lands peacefully, that doesn't crash, right? So violence and conflict are inherently more dramatic. In the 1960s, protest organizers really began to understand that violence helped to draw the media. And so they made themselves the target, the objects of violence, to draw national media and have it be sympathetic coverage. But that's not always what happens. And in some cases, we've seen a lot of front page coverage of, hey, like, look at these images of police engaging in violence against protesters. But there's also been, attention to the incidents of, buildings going up in flames. And that's led in part to, a softening of support for Black Lives Matter, even as overall 60% of the country still supports police reform as the main message they're taking away.
That's a really, really good point. And the sort of way in which this is all mediated is so sort of central to the story. Omar Wasow, thanks so much for making some time tonight.